Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to episode 3 of the podcast. Today I'm here with Luke, who is a student at the University of Jamestown. I chose Luke for this project, for this interview specifically, because he belongs to so many social groups on campus, and he's in everything on campus. So, Luke, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good, good. Let's talk a little bit about our first topic. It's personal identity. What makes you uniquely you? So let's start off with what is your name and what do you do on campus?
Hi, I'm Luke. I do a bunch of things on campus. I am involved in athletics. I play on the baseball team. I'm involved in a number of clubs, including Student Senate and Student Athlete Association. I also participate in extracurriculars like theater and choir. So overall, I'm involved in just a crazy amount of things on campus, and I think that's really what part of what makes me me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in our class, we talked about a theory called communication accommodation theory, and basically what that is we accommodate, we change how we communicate based on what different group or people surround us. Uh, do you find any truth in that? What are your different groups, and how many different ways do you speak through them or around them?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely speak differently in different social situations. I'm going to speak differently at a baseball practice than I am when running a student senate meeting. There's kind of that social chameleon aspect about it,
Mm-hmm.
where I have to be. It's not more or less myself, but it's more or less, I guess, authentically myself. Sometimes, you have to tone it back in certain situations when you're dealing with um, people in perhaps important positions, and you have to, be on your best behavior.
Yeah.
Uh, but in terms of how I communicate differently, I think it's just it's not communicating differently. It's different levels of how outgoing you can be, or how kind of uh, hurt or tactful you need to be in different situations. So I think overall it's not a total difference, but it's just different shades of the same color.
For sure, for sure. For myself specifically, I'm in also in a lot of groups on campus. So when I am talking in a small group with my friends from say esports, I'm a lot more outgoing, and I
Hmm.
and I talk a lot louder, and
Hmm.
just share like similar humor with them in that instance. But then I go over and I hang out with my theater friends, a lot quieter people. We
Hmm.
still make a lot of the same jokes. It's a lot of the same people, but obviously very, very different based on. I try and base myself off of the way the room feels, that social chameleon aspect. Um, I
Absolutely.
I try and if it's a quiet room, read the room. Don't bust out laughing and make jokes about those people and stuff like that. So
Absolutely.
moving right along, um, what really goes along well with this is our aspect called code switching, where
Hmm.
people use different languages when they're talking to different groups. Do you speak any other languages or?
Not different languages specifically, but I think there's an aspect of code switching that happens within those different social groups too.
Hmm.
I mean, even like with my group of baseball friends, there's going to be different like inside jokes and
Oh
different
yeah, for sure.
topics that you talk about with those people. I'm never going to talk about pitching mechanics with my esports friends, and I'm never going to talk about you know what's happening on the esports team with my baseball friends. Like those two things don't intermix.
Right.
So you kind of have to compartmentalize those different groups and code switch kind of your train of thought, not so much your language, but your train of thought between those different groups.
For sure. I think code switching's a little bit of a double entendre. It's got two different meanings there, both literally and um,
Absolutely.
language switching. I do very very vaguely speak different languages, and it's only when I'm around my grandmother.
Yeah.
She is full Ukrainian, and whenever she comes over, she's always yelling at us, telling us to get out of the kitchen when she's making food. But we also have this thing called No Hayayita. It's a celebration of life. That's usually when we're together as a celebration. So I use code switching when I am talking to my grandma. Just like during like Easter, we say Christastos Christ, which means Christ is risen, and you say Wisnos Christ, indeed he is. And it just like simple phrases that we still try and use our ethnic background from Ukraine, bringing it to America, and yeah, it's great for
Right.
me to just have another language under my belt. Obviously, not that many words, but it's there. I swear. Um, so, moving along in our class, we also talked about convergences and divergences. With a convergence, it's when like group A and group B are so similar that you basically use the same ex- excuse me, you use the same language with them. Do you have any groups like that on campus?
Yeah, absolutely. There's instances like where there's just like a lot of personnel overlap between the different things. Like a lot of you and Joe and those guys are
For sure.
in several of my different groups, including theater and choir and music and esports and Senate.
Hmm.
So there's that personnel overlap where even though we may be in different scenarios, we still have that knowledge of the kind of the intricacies of the communication that we have. Um, so even though we aren't always in the same situation, we still have that overlap, which converges our communication because even though we're like maybe not in exactly the same situation as when uh, something that we shared experience, we can still communicate about it with each other in that different situation. So absolutely, I think there's some convergence there.
For sure. And Luke and I are in a lot of the same groups. He listed, I think, like 6 or 7 of them off. Um, Especially for me, I think a lot of my groups on campus are all around the same people. Like, obviously, I have like different classes, and I'll have like a group over there. But my main core groups with everything I'm in, really, it overlaps all the time. I'm constantly converging, and whether that be a whole group of people making the same jokes or something like that, there's usually a sidebar with a few people like with us, we show each other memes all the time, just like a sidebar during Senate or something like that. We always have smaller groups inside our larger groups, and those just converge really well together, I think. And then we get to divergence, which is people who distance themselves from the groups that they don't necessarily identify with in that setting. So, say you have group A with group B, and then in group A, you're like quiet and reserved, and then group B, you're super loud and boisterous the whole time. Do you think you've ever had a divergence moment, like say uh, like an event or something where two worlds have really collided, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a good example of this is like the CAF
Oh, for sure.
is a place where there's just like a ton of mingling just between everyone on campus. And, occasionally I'll eat with, different groups or whatever. And in between those different groups, I sometimes get like a funny look or two because that's not the person that they're used to.
Right.
Either like a super outgoing for some groups, or in some groups I'm pretty reserved.
Mm.
So it's just that mixing that uh, you definitely see some divergence in.
For sure. For myself, it would be like I would say like casino night was one of those times.
Mm-hmm.
I know with baseball, you've never really had a chance to go to casino night, and I apologize for that. I mean, it's and you set it up too. It's just so demoralizing. But anyways, for me at casino night, I'd say specifically the freshman year one. I was still a little shy of like talking to new people, but then casino night, I really let myself go and just like hung out with my good friends. and other people like seniors from other classes who I had with them, they'd just be like, "Yo, I didn't know this side of you. I just
Uh-huh.
have never seen you this outgoing before." And then I kind of like took that and I was like, "Yeah, I don't really do that." So I try and converge myself with the same personality into every friend group, so they kind of just
Absolutely.
accept that this is Ian, this is where he is, this is who he is. And
Mhm.
so I take great pride whenever someone says they're a true friend of me, and I just act like me, like
Absolutely.
Luke, my great friend who's on the podcast with me. So we're getting into the last few questions here, almost out of time. Um, so the main topic we talked about during this chapter was the social identity of de-individualization effects. So a person tends to identify with a group when engaged in computer-mediated communication. So de-individualization means less individual, more social identity. Is there any instance where you've had this happen to you online?
Absolutely. I think that everyone becomes a little bit de-individualized when they get online, just because there's kind of that anonymity aspect.
Oh yeah,
So, you are, you can, I mean, I've seen instances of like even people getting in trouble because of that anonymity, and they depersonalize themselves to where they said something maybe they shouldn't have, and it
for
it came
sure.
back to haunt them. So definitely, it can be a difficult task to stay authentically yourself online. I I try to exist in spaces online where that isn't an issue for me.
Yeah,
I try not to go into those spaces where um, that is going to present an issue. But definitely, I've seen other people have that depersonalization effect happen to them while online. Absolutely.
for sure. Um, Specifically for myself, I like to bring in topics about myself a lot because it's just like an insider perspective. Um, I would say I tend to de-individualize on social media and like just like playing video games online. It's just not having people see your face and talk to you makes it easier to talk to other people. So your words start to flow more, and then
Mm.
obviously, if you're playing a game that that makes you rage, sometimes you're gonna say some stuff that you don't really mean to the person. Um, so yeah, de-individualization,
Absolutely.
definitely. And I would say for social media, I mean, even when you are showing your face, you're showing a you're showing a place online where you're happy, where you're most happy,
Yeah.
or else you
Yes.
wouldn't share it online unless it was like losing a loved one. But I don't think you should post about that online. Um, but I would say we find most social medias with people in their best image,
Hmm.
other than the photos that they took before or the ones that they edited or something like that. I think that's mainly what the de-individualization is. It's less individual, more social identity. And the last thing we're going to talk about here is depersonalization. Excuse me. Depersonalization is identifying others within a group membership rather than an individual. So, saying like someone from theater is a theater kid, and that's all they'll be known for. Have you ever experienced something like this before in the groups that you're in, or
Actually, it's kind of unique for me because I get very little of this just because of the sheer amount of things that I do.
for sure?
It I've heard people say that it's hard to put me in a box, but obviously I see this around me all the time with baseball because athletics are such a huge part of this campus that um, often people will be labeled just as an athlete or just as a football player, even though there are maybe parts of themselves that are bigger than that, and that isn't what they want to label themselves as.
Exactly.
Um, it happens all the time,
Hmm.
especially in a place like Jamestown, where it's very personal, and you are maybe seen as only one thing, where you want to be known as for branching out, and that can be really tough.
Hmm.
But for me personally, I've never really had to experience that, which is very fortunate for me, just because everyone kind of my shtick around campus is that I do so much.
For sure. I think I have been put in this category before. Maybe not like in a meaningful way, like you are this, but like definitely jokingly. Like some people will come up to me and you're like, oh, you're in band, you're in choir, you're in theater, you're this kid. You're just a music kid. You know, that's all you do. And I don't do it on UJ anymore, but I used to be a pretty avid football player, soccer player in high school. And when I would be a lot like you. You know, this guy did everything. He was in theater, he was in football, he was in band, he was in choir, and he was on speech, and he was on student council. Like this kid did everything. But I think I toned it down in college for my own sanity. But yeah. Well, Luke Zimmer, thank you very much for hopping on the podcast with me.
Thank you for having me.
I had a great conversation here with Luke. Up next, we are going to have another podcast. I think I'll be interviewing Weston. So stay tuned for that, and we'll see you guys next time.